Happy Flag Day! To all my American friends, today we celebrate Flag Day. In my family, we also celebrate my grandpa's birthday. Not all of you may be familiar with either Flag Day or my grandpa's birthday, but across the world, this is known as World Blood Day. And blood features prominently in the story of servant of God John Bradburne, most notably after his death, which is quite curious, so you're probably going to want to read more about him. And if you do want to read more about him, have I got the book for you, out just in time for servant of God John Bradburne's birthday, which is today as well. We have Of John Bradburne by Didier Rance. It is an updated book. So we all know we have the chunky monkey that Didier had already written, John Bradburne, The Vagabond of God, nice and thick. And this one came out, I want to say, around 2015. Can we see that? 2017, but it came out originally in France in 2012. Now, you may know John, of course, from the biography that was written by one of his best friends, Father John Dove. This book, though, is written about a friend by a friend, and it has quite a different flavor than Didier's book. And then you may know him also from one of his many books on poetry. There are a lot, but there's also the mystical dimension of poetry in John Bradburne in the Carthusian. Then, like I say, there's a lot of smaller pamphlets and books on the story of John Bradburne's life. This is considered the most authoritative, by which I mean it's the deepest treatise of his life. But as the cause for sainthood has moved forward, new questions have arisen and need to be addressed, or just friends of John Bradburne have gone deeper into the scholarship. It's part of the process in a cause for sainthood, really examining a person's life. And with all that servant of God John Bradburne did and wrote, we know that he's the most prolific writer in the English language. There's a lot to look at. So there's a lot to analyze, and there's probably going to be great studies coming out for years to come. So again, this one just came out, Of John Bradburne by Didier Rance. It's published by John Bradburne Memorial Society, JBMS. If I say that, that's what it means. If you're not familiar with Didier Rance, he is a writer, historian, and lecturer, a secular Franciscan like me. He is also a deacon in the Catholic Church, the former National Director for France of Aid to the Church in Need, Vice President of the John Henry Newman French Association. He's the author of the acclaimed biography that I just showed you, John Bradburne, The Vagabond of God, which is an abridged edition of the French original, Les Vagabonds de Dieu, Paris 2012, which won the Grand Prix Catholique de Literature. Pardon my French. Sorry, that kind of needed to be said. So what's in here? So exciting. There are 3 main sections. So we start with a foreword and then abbreviations and Shona names. Why is that important? Well, number one, we have abbreviations now for the various scholarly works and collections of his writing. And so those are the abbreviations. The Shona names, I'll read you the note that's here. I don't need to recreate it. Many geographical and administrative names have changed throughout the years, especially after independence, starting with that of the country itself. Southern Rhodesia became Rhodesia. Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, and since 1980, Zimbabwe. Several towns have changed their names. To avoid anachronisms, place names are written as they were at the time they are mentioned. Thus, the capital of the country was Salisbury at the time of John Bradburne, Harare since independence. And other places, I'll tell you, they have multiple spellings, were quite similar before and after independence. So Mutemwa, M-T-E-M-W-A, became Mutemwa, M-U-T-E-M-W-A. There are also some other spellings like M-O-O-T-M-W-A, and once it was even spelled as Mutokwa. So were a variety of spellings. Some of it I'm not sure if John Bradburne wasn't being a little funny in some of the poetry, because a lot of his poetry has puns and things in it. But they kind of give you that there are multiple spellings for different towns, just letting you know. Part 1 is then the companion to John Bradburne, The Vagabond of God, the big chunky book I just showed you up there. It says, the reader will find here, translated by Malachi O'Higgins, the pages published in 2012 in the French version of the biography, John Bradburne, Le Vagabond de Dieu, and are not included in the abridged English version. These pages shed complementary light on John Bradburne's time and environment, and on several episodes and dimensions of his life, giving a better understanding of the originality of his character. The texts have been revised, expanded, and where necessary, updated following the progress of research on John Bradburne. See if I can quickly find you the second section. I think there's 18 in the first section. Part 2 are studies published in the JBMS newsletter. Over the years, that's Didier Rance, submitted articles to the John Bradburne Memorial Society. The dimensions of the society allowed the publication of only abridged versions. In Part 2, I present the full versions of these studies, which have been revised, sometimes enlarged with new elements, and updated where necessary. So if you've been a follower of the newsletter, don't skip these. They may have been expanded upon. Yay! Let's see if we can skip ahead and find the last section. Ooh, I think I missed where it started. Apologies. Part 3 is unpublished studies. No, just by the way, these are things you may not have even known existed. Very exciting. And in the back, you can see I had a sticky note, are the notes. The notes are renumbered starting at the beginning of every chapter, and they're all in the back. Some are citations, some are poetry, some are full-on notes. And this is where you're really going to see those abbreviations are back here. So if you don't have them memorized, you may want to put a post-it note, or you could easily make a little photocopy this or put it on a sticky note. I would just do a little photocopy. You could even laminate it and use it as your bookmark for in the notes. That would make a lovely bookmark to move along where you go that if you have the ability to laminate things. There's then an index, which is just one page front and back and one more side of a page. So not a lot there. It's a mix of topics as well as names. Lots of names in here. So what are all these studies? You're probably dying to know. I will tell you this is more of an academic book than some of the others are. And there's a place for that. And some of these are questions that are rows as well. And so they may have a question in italics and then an answer. Or they are just further study. They might be a question that was actually posed by somebody in the newsletter or somebody in the society, or it may just be the person, in this case, usually Didier. They may be his own personal questions. As he said, he was a secular Franciscan himself. So he wants to know. One of them is, wait, I'll find it. Was John Bradburne really a Franciscan tertiary? An inquiry, and that is chapter 29 of the book. Some other people have questions about the Cloud of Unknowing. That is a book that is for people fairly advanced in the spiritual life. If you are a little newbie, you may mistake some of those things. So that needed to be examined as well, and it is here. They also examine divine mercy. Could he be an ecumenical saint? Was he a fool for Christ? They look at John Bradburne and G.K. Chesterton. Oh, I got ahead of myself there. I've told you almost all of the unpublished studies. So there's lots of great ones there. There are, how many there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Didier's been busy. There are 10 unpublished studies back here. In the articles in the newsletter, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Why am I counting them out? Because each section is not renumbered. I would have assumed that they were, that each part was renumbered, but you can see part 1 has 18, part 2 picks up at 19. The index is very clear though, and I'll tell you, this is meant to be read as you read it. The page numbers are in the upper outside corners. The name of the book is on the left-hand side, and the particular study you're in is on the upper right-hand side. The print is a little bit small, but it is nice and dark, and the pages are very white. So I find it very readable. Again, I am reading with my readers on, because that's what I wear when I make the videos. The chapters seem to start out nice headers, and then we have this big section in italics. You know I'm kind of not groovy with that, because that can be particularly difficult to read, and it is a Francie script there. It's worth the time to read there. This one is interesting, like chapter 1, the Bradburnes in the Hills, hundreds of years of English history. And there is already a superscript for a note at the end. It says, the Bradburne family kept keeps records of its ancestry. John Bradburne knew about it, in particular about some figures, but the one that seemed to have fascinated him most is a Jewish woman from Venice, kidnapped and married by a certain Jad Bradburne. Like, what? It is going to startle you. They go here. Gresham School. In Gresham's School Book of Memory, I will plant me a tree. John Bradburne is quoted. He spent 4 years in this boarding school. So it tells you more about the boarding school. So in many cases, these are things that are going to fill in the gaps of your knowledge and studies of John Bradburne. Now, I didn't find as much jumping in from the front of the history aspect. If you don't know the history of England in Africa, specifically in Zimbabwe, there may be some things that as you jump in the beginning that aren't going to make sense. But if you have a certain surface level knowledge, this is going to help you to go deeper. Even these English things, like Gresham School really means nothing to me. So I'm excited to learn more about that. What do I know about Campania and Palma Campania? I really don't know that much about Naples and Vesuvius, but they are going to tell us more about that here. So some of these are quite short, like the one I was just saying. Quite short, right? And some of them are definitely longer, depending on the study. There is a lot of quotation of the poetry, as well as quotations of, if you're familiar at all with John Bradburne, usually when he wrote letters, they were also poetry. And so quotation from letters to various people, including his own mother, are cited in here. And that one, I know that one in particular is in the one of, was he really a Franciscan tertiary? Again, John Bradburne, when he died, was 1979. Well, our new rule was 1978. So we weren't united under the new rule by the time really that John Bradburne died. That news probably never even reached him. I don't know. I haven't fully read that chapter yet. And we may never know that. He may have found out about it and maybe it did not have an impact on him. I don't know. We're going to need to get in and look at those things. At the time of John Bradburne, the Franciscan Third Order of St. Francis, was mostly individual fraternities, not related to other individual fraternities. They would be under one group, maybe under a particular friary of Friars Minor, or friary of Capuchins, or friar of Friars Minor conventionals. Okay, so they each had their own third order groups under a particular friary. Some of them were united in broader groups, and some were not. Some of them, it may have been like all of the Capuchin third orders in a particular area of the world. Some of them may have been all the conventionals in a particular area of the world, like that. But they weren't really united. And even as the different provinces of friars were getting united and reorganized, there's so much reorganization, and unfortunately so many records lost. So there's only so much that we've been able to recreate and capture. But there are still letters and things written by servant of God John Bradburne that show up it's getting probably bigger gaps in time that things are coming up, but there's new material still coming up. So if you know anything, if you have any information, please bring that up. Let's look at some of these topics. Did I read them all to you? In the part that was the companion to John Bradburne, The Vagabond of God, we have the one I just read you, The Bradburnes in the Hills, Hundreds of Years of English History, Scareworth and Its Surrounds, Gresham School, The Gurkhas, Ord Wingate and the Chindits, English Catholicism at John Bradburne's entrance time, that means entrance into the Catholic Church, Buckfast Abbey, Parkminster Charterhouse, Palma Campania, Pricknish Abbey, Southern Rhodesia and the Catholic Church, the Shona, Mazo Valley, the Actrons and Mbebe, the Bugga, Leprosy in Mutemwa Center, The Love of Nature, Guerrilla Warfare in Mutoko and Mutemwa, Prayer and Spiritual Struggle. The ones in the JBMS newsletter are John Henry Newman and John Bradburne. John Bradburne's Mystical Marriage in a Santa Maria Mignano, John B. and the Bees. John Bradburne and Mutemwa, A Story of Mutual Loving Friendship. John Bradburne and St. Damien of Molokai. John Bradburne's Poetry. John Bradburne and Music. The unpublished studies are 10 Weeks and 10 Narrow Escapes, January 1942 to the 16th of March 1942. On chapter 27 is Arthur Cripps, God Maverick. 28 is St. Francis of Assisi and John Bradburne coming across lepers. Was John Bradburne really a Franciscan tertiary? An inquiry. John Bradburne and the Blessed Virgin Mary. John Bradburne and the Cloud of Unknowing. Divine Mercy in the Writings of John Bradburne. an ecumenical saint, a fool for Christ, and John Bradburne and G.K. Chesterton. Let's open it up just so you get the tone. I've jumped around a bit. I find the tone in all three sections to be very similar, friendly, accessible, but definitely still an academic tone. So let's look at chapter 33, An Ecumenical Saint. When John Bradburne's sainthood is recognized, the question will arise, what is he to be a patron saint of? One answer would be ecumenism, and that's David Crystal has said that. David Crystal is the person who has categorized and studied all the poetry. So he is very familiar with all the poetry, and so he has come up with that as a proposition. We don't know yet. We really don't know. This is just one examination. John Bradburne does not often speak of denomination or religions as such. Generally, he sees rather the persons, which is why, for example, we never find the term Judaism in his poem, but almost 600 times Jew or Jews. Like Newman, he did not view his entry into the Catholic Church as a conversion, but as an accomplishment. He thought he had nothing to deny of what was true, good, and beautiful in the religion of his father, only to widen the horizon. He wrote in 1971, Anglicanism is the richest blend of dignity and impudence. It thrills. With worthy resonance, its pious trend bends low towards the high eternal hills. So lifts it up the heart with ringing strains, that music Anglican immortal reigns. This attachment to his maternal Anglican church led him to several times to do for her what he could, certainly modest, but nonetheless significant. First example, the vicar of the Anglican Church of Ottery, where his father was a cooperator after his retirement, launched a campaign in 1953 to restore his church. John Bradburne decided to play his part. As there is only one thing he could do well, play the recorder, he did it in the streets of Exeter and gave to the restoration what he earned. An article in the local press described him as that kind of piper for modern Hamlin, who answered, when asked his name, "Just call me the jester of Christ the King," adding that he was a Roman Catholic, but he loved Ottery Church, and that I long for the day when all the Christians shall worship together, and for those in the Ottery area, Ottery Church is obviously the right place. And there goes on. There are a second and a third example. There could be more. And so it goes into that. You can see how it goes in and out of the poetry and other writings. Let's look at John Henry. Well, that's very Anglican too. I was going to say John Henry Newman and John Bradburne. But let's pick one from chapter 1. Love of nature. John Bradburne took pleasure in quoting Thomas Browne's dictum, "Art is the perfection of nature, and nature is the art of God." Here are a few insights on how he lived it. Attachment to nature was a permanent feature of John Bradburne's personality. The poems of this painter in words on nature, from his native Cumberland to Jagona, fills more than one volume. They reveal an observer who was attentive, curious, and inventive, moving from lavish puns to keen and refined observation. As with Verlaine, landscapes were for him states of mind, and his poems tell us much about the person who contemplates as the nature contemplated. His vision of nature is also, of course, the fruits of a certain culture. His gaze was influenced by painters that he loved, especially Claude Lorraine and Constable, who combine religious feeling with a feeling for nature as a space of vast and open horizons. In his relation to a tree or a mountain, John Bradburne is at his most original. Why do we say that? You're going to have to read this and find out. Friends, I like to say, happy Flag Day, happy birthday, Grandpa, happy World Blood Day, and of course, happy birthday, servant of God, John Bradburne. Friends, may God bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the good Lord bless you in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti.